Welcome to Shaping Healthcare, a podcast by CitiusTech. I'm your host, Laurel Rockall. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with two cybersecurity experts, Vipin Varma and Sai Venkataraman. Vipin is the Senior Vice President and Head of Cybersecurity Practice at CitiusTech, and Sai is the co-founder and CEO of Discern Security. Together, they'll provide us with valuable insights into cybersecurity posture in healthcare and how organizations can better protect sensitive patient data. Vipin and Sai, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Laurel. Great pleasure being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And we're speaking on such a big topic, such a very important topic in the digital age. Both of you have extensive experience in leading cybersecurity initiatives. Vipin, I'd like to start with you. Can you share some of your perspective on the current state of cybersecurity in healthcare, and maybe what are some of the most pressing concerns that you're seeing today?
Right. So, Laurel, firstly, thanks for having us here again. Healthcare is a particularly or a very peculiar organization or set of organizations, and we are at a great place in time and space at this stage. On one hand, there is a lot of possibility. There is a lot of digitization and a lot of efforts towards improving healthcare and the well-being of people, giving patients the best care that we can, and giving them the best of technology it can bring to them. But at the same time, the environment, the way it is today, has opened us up to new risks. And as we open up to new technologies and new digitization, the risks follow that. Healthcare has traditionally had data which has been very critical. We have patients' data which cannot be replicated. Once you lose it, you lose it. And there is a lot of private information that is there. So protection of the health systems so that health can be provided, as well as the protecting the information of people and their privacy becomes paramount. In this milieu, in this year, it began bad and it has continued to go bad from a threat perspective. So while people were traditionally after money and therefore financial institutions, they were following the money trail, focus this year or the last, I think, a year and a half now has also been on the healthcare industry because there is very valuable data to be got. And the ransomware incidents and other incidents kind of play to that. The other thing, of course, in healthcare is the downtime from an impact which takes place from ransomware others is directly impacting the lives of people, and which is not acceptable to any one of us. So therefore, I think we are at a juncture where we are looking to make sure the cybersecurity of our systems remain paramount, and that doesn't let any people's safety go, be compromised in any way.
Absolutely. Very real examples there, and you're right. Yeah, the threat's always constant, but you're very right there in the saying that it feels like it's more constant, more real, or more persistent. Sai, as CEO of a security company, what are your perspectives there with that?
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would love to piggyback and also add to some of the points that Vipin made. As Vipin said, a big focus of cybersecurity in healthcare is to protect all the sensitive data that's there, patient data, private data. And this year, the biggest cybersecurity challenge in healthcare really is ransomware. And a major cybersecurity company recently put out a study saying that 2/3 of healthcare organizations have been victims of ransomware. And think about it, 2/3 of organizations. Is there any other category where almost 2/3 of the companies have been victims of ransomware attacks? And this is because the data is valuable and present rich targets to nation states, to organized gangs. And so that's really the number one problem. And part of the problem also is that while there's investment in cybersecurity, deployment maturity in healthcare has not quite kept up with the purchase of tools and buying of tools. And so I would say those are the two big cybersecurity challenges. How do we mature cybersecurity practices, and how do we protect against ransomware?
Great examples, absolutely. And staggering statistics there that you mentioned. Vipin, many healthcare systems, they rely on outdated technology, these legacy systems. How do they contribute to security gaps, and what steps should organizations take in order to modernize their infrastructure?
Right. So a couple of things here. Firstly, of course, while there is a lot of investment in cybersecurity across the board in healthcare organizations. Traditionally, healthcare has been underinvested in cybersecurity. That was because of many reasons, because of, I will say, reduced digitization earlier. So not so much exposure was there, or not as much risk was felt due to, systems being and data being exposed. But that has suddenly kind of, accelerated exponentially. And therefore, there is a lot more risk today. But catch up takes time, right? So there is a lot of a lot of, I'll say, old systems because of underinvestment. Right people, while we have some very good people, the right operations and the right team is not there, not always there in all the places. There are a lot of debt due to old technology being in place, not just in the cybersecurity control space, but also in the various systems that are deployed, various systems that are IT systems. But there is also a large category of, outdated medical technology which has been deployed in terms of various medical devices in various health systems. So protecting all of these and protecting them today becomes a big important step for all of us.
You mentioned at the beginning there that jump to more digitization and more modernized systems. And now we have a more growing use of mobile devices and remote access when it comes to healthcare. And there's another challenge there, an opportunity for securing the users that are using this technology and the devices, and it all becomes important there. Sai, how can organizations ensure that their cybersecurity posture covers both user behavior, because now you have to worry about everybody and how they're using their devices, and the device level protection? How we can do that effectively?
Yeah, you used exactly the right words there. The word is covers, and the metric is your coverage ratio, and that starts with discovery. An organization needs to discover, hey, what are all the assets we have? What are all the devices we have? Who are all the users we have? What are all the applications we have? And then part two of it is, have we deployed our cybersecurity there? Are the right controls in place? So there's a phased approach to this. And one of the things we find, and we found statistically in healthcare, is that an average healthcare organization uses about 30% of the controls available to them, which means 70% of the controls that they're paying for, they're not really using. And allied to that is that there's always leakage. There is a set of devices, there is a set of users who are not protected at all. And these users, these devices are super vulnerable to ransomware attacks. Imagine, you have all this cybersecurity, but there are devices where your endpoint security is not even deployed. And there are users who have never been trained or who are not protected by email security. So leakage, or who have not turned on multi-factor authentication, leakage in coverage, leakage in controls. You've got these security products, but have you deployed them? Are you protecting all your assets? That's, we've seen significant gaps there. And these are things that can be solved. I would almost argue this is a low-hanging fruit we start with before we purchase more tools, before we invest in more technology.
You just highlighted the importance of cross-platform intelligence and how all these components need to be working together, and cybermesh, improving security posture. How does creating cybermesh help care organizations gain a better view of their security, and what specific risks does that help address?
Yeah, to set the context around cybermesh, protecting your devices, protecting your users, protecting your online activity, protecting your emails, it's important to understand that cybersecurity today is super fragmented. No cybersecurity vendor has a market share greater than 10%. You go to a healthcare organization, even a mid-sized one, you would find tens of vendors. It's not unusual to find 60, 70 cybersecurity vendors at a client. And so the cyber mesh is where all these security products start working together. And we're making full use of integrations. We have overlay layers that coordinate these security products. And our experience is that when security products start working better with each other, for example, your endpoint, your web gateway, your network security, it starts to coordinate. You have a unified view. You can take policy actions together. it reduces the probability of a breach by 90%, which is a very significant statistic. And so the benefit of a cyber mesh where your security products work better together, one example of that is, you have a unified views of your controls, and you have compensating controls, and all the products work better together. It actually, all these sort of actions, they reduce the possibility of a breach by 90%. And even if a breach happens, the cost of that breach comes down significantly as well. And so the big benefit of a cyber mesh is really reducing the odds of falling victim to an attack.
Wow. Yes, 90% is a significant statistic there. That is really amazing. And Vipin, you mentioned earlier, we were talking about maybe the motivations of these attacks here. At first it was money, and now it's the importance of the data and how valuable that data is. I'd like to speak to you a little bit more about that. How can healthcare organizations protect the critical applications that rely on electronic health records and these systems while ensuring that it doesn't negatively impact the system performance or the accessibility for the users?
Right. So a couple of things we must remember. One is availability of the application and the support to both healthcare providers as well as the patients is critical, right, at all stages. So one of the aspects that we have to focus on is to make sure that other than just the capacity and the performance of the system is that they remain available. That's one thing, right? And when I say available, also remember that we are talking of not just one system. We are talking of a mesh of different systems between different, if I can say, providers. You have the backend payers. So there is a whole interconnected system of different vendors that come into play to make sure that the right services are provided. Now, all of this rests or hinges on the fact that we are making the right choices while putting the controls in place so that these interfaces can happen without much, if I can say, delay and much degradation in performance, like you say. Now, one thing which has really helped in this is the migration to cloud. While it has opened us up to various other challenges and risks, but opening up microservices, interfacing rather than relying on batch processes, looking at microservices, looking at the integrations using the cloud, that is helping, of course. That also provides you the built-in availability. But on the other aspect of performance, you need to make sure, and to taking from Sai's point, right? You have series of controls that are placed. You want to make sure you have optimizing the coverage. That means while there is a certain amount of overlap, there are no gaps. That means no risks are left underexposed. But at the same time, you don't want to throw control after control or technology or a license after license at the same problem, thereby kind of maybe even sometimes impacting the performance or the end goal of that particular system. So what you need to do is 2 or 3 things. One, you need to optimize. You look at the architecture from a point of view of what are the objectives that you have in mind. So you start with the risks. You look at what are the threats to you. And from that, you work on what is your reference architecture end to end, and make sure that there are overlaps, but there are not too many duplications taking place. And then to Sai's point, make sure that each control is working to its defined objective. And if it works to defined objective, it will have the right performance that you need. So the visibility to making the performance of the control and the outcome of the control is very important. And then making sure that you are being able to monitor it during its operations. You have the right operations team and the effort in place to getting the control objectives that you desire. So all of this has to play as a concert from planning, design, and to the execution for it to all work seamlessly. That makes sense.
And through that all, we have compliance right there with a strong cybersecurity practice. I mean, these are essential, right? And so with the compliance piece, what are some of the main challenges that organizations are facing when they're aligning their cybersecurity with these standards? Is there a way to maybe streamline the process and make it easier
Right.
for all involved?
So typically in let's take in the healthcare space, we have had HIPAA, and HIPAA has tried to give us various recommendations for what needs to be done, and what guidelines on what has to be complied with, right? On the other hand, you have frameworks like High Trust or NIST, or you have benchmark standards like CIS. All of these are guidelines for us to plan what should be the optimal set of controls that you need to put in place, what should be the outcome that you are expecting from each one of these security controls that are deployed, and what is therefore your coverage during any attack. Let's say you take a recommendation like MITRE, and a MITRE attack framework can help you plan what are the various controls that need to be there to make sure that at every stage of a potential attack, you are covered. So while regulations are important, from a point of view, a lot of times they are seen as a burden to have to make sure that you're able to comply to them. You could ideally also look at them as a method of being able to mature your security, make sure that you are doing the right things. So if you do take it from that purpose, you will automatically come to a stage where you are using the regulations to your advantage rather than being trying to look at them from what I need to do. Having said that, yes, there is a lot of onus on the healthcare organizations to report. Let's say for the medtech device manufacturers, you have the whole FDA set of regulations. So there is the requirement to keep visibility to what do you need to comply to also, so that you make sure that at least you do that. But my recommendation always is to make sure that you look at what is applicable and then use that to your benefit to actually plan for what you're doing.
Excellent recommendations. Sai, in your specific position, I was actually, if I could ask you the same sort of question, what do you recommend for healthcare organizations when they balance compliance with cybersecurity threat?
Vipin did a great job outlining, all the frameworks that are there and some of the trade-offs as well. The interesting thing about compliance is that they give you a set of best practices. And it's a good starting point. And one of the things that's happened with this new generation of technologies, AI, Gen AI, machine learning, is that we can use technology to better comply with these best practices. Now, the other part of this is compliance standards are a shifting goalpost as well. There are new standards, there are revisions of existing standards. And again, technology can help us keep up with compliance. There's automation. And so, the good part about modern cybersecurity tech is that we can pretty quickly help customers get to, let's say, 75, 80% of what is needed from a compliance standpoint. Now, there's also another viewpoint, which is that every organization is a little bit different, but compliance is the same, and these best practices are static. They're the same for all organizations. And that's where, having experts, having technology that understands your specific posture, your specific exposure. So personalizing cybersecurity solutions for your organization, that is also critical. So a balance is needed. Compliance gives us best practices, but at the same time, the people who provide you cybersecurity services and the tools that you use need to be learning tools and learning people. And it can personalize solutions and posture to your organization's requirements, to the threats that your organization faces. And so compliance alone will not solve the problem. It can help, but a personalized posture is just as critical.
Very, very good recommendation. And that balance of like, these are static regulations, but there's having that flexibility and personalization for the solution there. I really appreciate that you mentioned AI and machine learning, and both of you have worked extensively in your fields with AI and machine learning. It's feels like such a buzzword, How do you envision AI-powered solutions such as Discern Security's platform? How do you envision those solutions helping healthcare organizations automate these security assessments and improve their security posture?
Yeah, technology has evolved a fair bit. And again, there are trade-offs. There's what customers are willing to accept, willing to let AI do. And I'll give you a few examples. For example, technology is at a point where we can automate assessments against frameworks. All the frameworks that Vipin just mentioned, HIPAA, HITRUST, CIS, NIST, MITRE. We can now automate the assessment of your security controls against these frameworks. And customers are happy to use these automated assessments. Now, once you automate these assessments, we can now learn your organization's posture, understand your organization's threats. We can even use technology and AI to personalize understanding of your organization's security posture. Customers are again, more than happy to use AI. And then once you have a set of recommendations on what we can do, we can start to make changes. And again, the technology is there where the AI can even make these changes. Let's say you need to make a specific control change in a major security tool. We can now make it with no human interventions. But there are two challenges. When you actually intervene using technology, customers are not yet ready to let an AI make those control changes because there's trust and there's still an error rate. And this is where in the industry, when we go and meet people, there's a spectrum. There are those who embrace AI. There are the AI skeptics. Personally, where I'm somewhere in the middle. We use AI in safe ways as assistants, but some amount of human supervision is probably still needed. And that's where you have to be smart about your use of AI as assistants. Assessments is a great place for AI. Change management, you still need the right experts and to make the right changes.
And speaking of assessments and looking at, if you have great solutions in place, you have a strong cybersecurity posture, Vipin, what key metrics and KPIs should healthcare organizations focus on to ensure a continuous improvement in that over time?
Right. So, see, just let me step back once so that we get to the crux of why we are talking of metrics. The first part is, what Sai mentioned also, is our ability to measure, have everything visible to you. So visibility to risk and visibility to the effectiveness of what we have put into place is very important. So first set of metrics is to make sure that you have your risk identified and you're able to measure risk against some identified parameters, right? So you should be able to coalesce all the inputs you are getting from various controls into a unified risk picture. And Sai did mention some time back about a single dashboard talking about state of various things, etc. Right? So I wanted to start with saying your final goal is to make sure that you are being able to report a risk and looking at a risk as a threshold activity, saying that, okay, beyond this threshold, I need to do something. And within this, I need to do something else and all that. And then to be able to drill down from there, to be able to see as to what is the component of the overall risk, which is actually changing my figure. So the question about metrics, getting back there, the metrics have to be chosen in a way that they can actually contribute to this overall risk picture, right? So one very important metric is, like I started with availability, I started with in looking at the coverage of a particular control, right? So Sai mentioned, if you remember some time back, that while you have a plethora of controls deployed in most organizations, not everyone is deployed to its full potential, and not everyone is deployed across the full, surface or exposure, what we call, surface of exposure. So let's take, if I have a endpoint detection response tool, EDR tool, which is supposed to be deployed everywhere. Is it deployed everywhere? Right. If it is deployed, how many of them are meeting the right configuration requirements? So my point, going back to, I started at one end, at the top end, and I started drilling down to maybe the bottommost end. But my point really was, we should be looking at a single picture of risk, because beyond that, it's very difficult for us to see what, to be able to look at small bit points and create a mind map of our own. So therefore, our metric should allow us to be able to build up to the single point of a picture of risk. And in each one of them, we should be able to drill down further to get to specifics of how can I impact the risk, or how can I impact in reducing the risk that is there, right? So one example I gave was, if I am looking at a metric from an EDR, I need to be able to know how does it contribute to my overall risk. At the same point, when I drill down from the overall picture of risk, I should be able to get down into an actionable portion as to what do I need to fix in terms of coverage, what do I need to fix in terms of configuration, what do I need to fix in terms of the environments which are not fully protected today, right? Or which have high risk. So importance of metrics is to be able to make sure that we are able to do some of these activities I just said. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, no, that was excellent. Sai, how do healthcare organizations then assess the maturity of their cybersecurity programs? Are there frameworks or models that you recommend helping to benchmark that?
Yeah, I think the four most common, frameworks, there is the maturity of your controls against CIS. There's NIST, and within NIST there are a few different NISTs. There's the new CMMC model for those who do work with the government. We like MITRE quite a lot as well. Mapping both your vulnerabilities and your controls to the MITRE framework, and then overlaying all your security tools onto that framework, and then coming to conclusions. That works quite well. And then there's of course the HITRUST and HIPAA vertical specific frameworks as well. So most customers, they have the vertical specific frameworks, and they use one of MITRE or CIS or NIST. The frameworks themselves, there's a fair amount of overlap across these as well. So each of them can do the job. And then there's of course best practices for your organization. What is most relevant? That is important. Just relying on the frameworks alone, I would say the frameworks are necessary, but not sufficient.
We've had such a great conversation about cybersecurity today. And as we're speaking on this topic, do either of you gentlemen have any closing thoughts to leave us with? Sai, may I start with you?
Absolutely. The best way to get cybersecurity outcomes, the best cybersecurity outcomes usually require people, process, technology. Technology has evolved. We now have Gen AI, we have personalization, and we have the cybermesh, which is stitching together all your security tools. But people and process are still just as important. And that's where, we like as technology firms to work with experts and teams like Vipin and his team. And so, my closing thought would be, to get the best cyber outcomes, we need people, process, technology, all three.
People, process, technology. Excellent. Vipin?
I'll echo what Sai said in a slightly different manner. People, process, technology are all three very important. These are some things that have been the foundational building blocks of cybersecurity for a number of years now. What is changing today is the speed of response, right? The same people, process, technology, and I'm borrowing a term from the military space, which is you have the observe, orient, decide, act loop, and that the ability to, that you had more time to act earlier. Today, the time from a vulnerability being detected to the exploit being available is reduced from weeks to days, now to hours and minutes, right? So the time that you have to respond is reduced, and that the only way that you can make up for this time is by creating the right visibility in your organization. And the reason why we are talking here of assessment and assessing with tools is also to make sure that on one hand, you are able to do it quickly, but second way, you're also being able to do it based on certain benchmarks and baselines which are repeatable. So every time that you do a similar assessment, you are kind of measuring to the same standard. It is not based on a person's qualitative judgment at that time, right? So visibility is important. Gaining visibility of your risk and your environment and what is happening there. The ability to measure is equally important. The third major thing is you need to have very clear idea about what are you trying to protect, because not everything can be protected equally. So making sure that you have your critical assets identified, people, data, systems, assets identified well, so that you are able to make sure that you are able to prioritize actions and take a look at that appropriately. Lastly, in all of this space, there is a great deal of cooperation And I'm going now to the people aspect to what Sai was talking about. And we will always be limited in our organizations to the amount of expertise that we have internally. So there is an increasing requirement to network, to learn from each other, and to be able to leverage on the expertise which others can provide to us through informal and formal means. So combination of all these things is what I think will hold us in good stead as we go forward. And absolutely last, of course, we did talk a lot of technology, and I don't want to keep repeating it. We have to make sure that we leverage technology to our advantage to do all of this, what I just said, right? Collaborate better, have better visibility, have better ability to respond and react, and we have better ability to do that in the time frame that we want to do, right? We have to close the loop as quick as possible. That's for all of us to do.
Excellent points. And Vipin, Sai, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for your time today, sitting down with me with your deep expertise in cybersecurity and chatting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laurel. Been a pleasure.
The Shaping Healthcare podcast is brought to you by CitiusTech, a leader in healthcare consulting and IT services. To find out more about CitiusTech, visit CitiusTech.com. To listen to more interesting insights on healthcare technology and innovations, search and subscribe to the Shaping Healthcare podcast. Thank you for listening. If you want to share any feedback or would like to be featured in our podcast, do write to us at citiusvision@citiustech.com.